Yeah, exactly. So the token here is not decentralized. It's automated.
Yeah. So any other questions on this topic before we move on?
No.
Well, it sounds like
I wanted to say one more thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, just that's important, and we just want to be very clear because we are building the commons are decentralized. This system is automated, is the kind of thing that we're going to have to address. It needs to go on our FAQ. So I'm calling it out now. Like this process, it is regulated. It has KYCs. It's a membership. This whole thing is it's cryptographically automated, but we need to be very upfront about it so that people aren't going crazy, and asking us the same questions a million times. But also, this is a procedural thing where we have to meet the legal and technical requirements, etc. But the commons have a different set of properties, and this is allowing us to make them. And so we just want to be clear that Henry Ford also didn't make assembly lines with assembly lines.
Yeah,
there wasn't an assembly line to make the first assembly. So the point here is that we're gonna probably face a little bit of why is that centralized, regulated, all the stuff that we're doing, but we just have to have our FAQ prepared for, we're doing best practices at this stage to produce things that are best practices for the next stage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we just end up with a shitty Moloch DAO. But anyway, so sorry, I'm a little disgruntled. They didn't take my last proposal. So let's see. I think there's a few questions we need to just get definitive answers on.
Okay.
Timeline of raise, this walkthrough of raise. I'm proposing a 4-day period in this continuous thing, but it's Baron's call to say yes.
Why 4 days?
I figure 4 days is enough for FOMO. It powers through a weekend for too much, but a week is too long.
It's too long.
Week is too long. As long as we make sure that we are not stuck on starting on a Friday and ending on Monday. If it starts on a Friday, they'll end on a Tuesday, and that way there's a full business day, pretty much no matter what. I'd be down for 5 days. I'm open. That is just my
numbers. Even though I'll put this around. Let's say 5.
And what's with the October 15th date? Why specifically that date? That's a Tuesday, by the way.
Well, that means we can connect with people at DevCon.
Yeah, because if you would say 5 days extra, that will give people time until Sunday evening to do whatever. So if you say October 15th is a close of the first iteration, and you start a 5-day period subsequent to October 15th, then it runs up until Sunday evening.
Well, so the 5-day period would start when we hit the soft cap. So unless we hit the soft cap on October 14th, then
it stops. It's true.
Yeah. No, I think it's good to have that definite time frame for the 25% for the max. So no, I like that idea. That's good.
Cool.
Is there any other pieces on this? I will say also it will need to be slightly checked in after we talk about open sourcing CAD.
I know that there was this topic on the right as well, but it's also the next topic we need to discuss is also touched by that. So it's influenced by that.
Okay, should we move on to that?
Yeah,
well, are there any other open items that we would need to make sure are defined before we move on to this and say decision is made?
Let's just recap one more time so we were all on the same page. So we have a iteration 1 starts at which date exactly?
Jeff?
September 23rd.
Okay, and it runs until October 15th. if we hit the soft cap before October 15, then we add another 5 days that allow people to get the 2.5x multiplier until we hit the hard cap. And if the hard cap, or if the 5 days expire or the hard cap is reached, we go into iteration 2. Then iteration 2 starts after the 5 days or the max, the hard cap is met from iteration 1, and runs until the soft cap is met. There's no time delay or frame, no boundaries on that part. And then once we hit the soft cap, we add another 5 days to reach the hard cap on iteration 2, and so forth for every other iteration. So every next iteration then starts when the max cap is hit or the 5 days expire, and then has a continuous run until the soft cap again is reached each iteration.
And just for clarification, the like going from iteration 1 to iteration 2 and so forth, it's always an automatic thing. So that means that's either after the hitting the hard cap or the soft cap plus 5 days, because it could be that after the hitting the soft cap, you never get to the 25% surplus, but you can reach the 5 days. And in either of these cases, automatically phase 2 starts. So we don't have to do anything manual. It's just open.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yep.
Automated. Yeah.
And then if we're hitting that 25% cap and someone sends in 100K and it partially fills, then the first part should get 2.5x and the second part should get 2x.
Yeah, I already had foreseen that so in the code, so that's a plan.
It's a classic.
Okay.
One thing I didn't take into account, but I was questioning it right now. It could be so that if some whale would like dump 1 million into that round 2 immediately, it could be that or like 1.2 million, that he overflows into 3 iterations. I was just wondering if I have to take that into account. Because that sort of improves, it increases the logic of looking at the steps a little more, so it might consume more gas, but I don't think it's a problem.
I'm pretty sure, I mean, it's always good to have these extra checks. I'm pretty sure that will be impossible because the whitelist should not have it should not allow anyone to put in $1 million into this thing, or even 700K. There should be a limit there, but if we need an extra check, I think the gas is probably worth it.
The checks are fine, but what I was going to say is based on what we've discussed so far, remember that our allowances are valued. So when someone applies, we're not letting them. If they try to give us a number, you should assert that you are only taking up to the number. Like you literally should just return the extra or whatever. I mean, we're saying you get so many, right?
Yeah.
So if that's part of the logic for the address, then you shouldn't have overflow because you should be only giving what you're allocated.
Yeah. So and I'll implement it sort of greedy in the sense that if my allowance is only 50 and I send in 60. The contract will take 50, convert it to tech tokens, and just send 10 back or something, or just take 50 actually, because that's the way it's going to work.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly. There'll only be the allowance will be controlled, or that take will be controlled. And I think that our allowance should be based off of tokens. So if we say on the whitelist, hey, you can have this many, we'll tell everyone how many tokens they can have, not how much money they can send us. Because that's what we really care about, is how many tokens can
I agree.
Yeah.
So they can actually send in more money in later stages.
So that's exactly the topic we have identified as the second challenge the topic we need to define a bit more in detail. So we looked at the allowance we would give to people to not create like one single whale that has like 50% of the hatch list, because if we only, let's imagine we only sell out iteration 1 and no other iteration, then we need to base the first allowance to the max hatching, how to say, hatching weight, let's say, or mass in the hatch phase. So we made a list of that. It's I'm not sure if I'm making myself clear here.
So,
Jeff, you want to jump in?
Do you want me to pull it up? Yeah, sure. So we realized that, so this is the soft cap minimum. So this is the minimum size of, or the number of tech tokens, the tech token supply. So raising only the soft cap at the smallest multiplier would get us about 2.5 million supply. Our hard cap with the max multiplier would be 3.75 million. So if we're just focusing on that, I mean, we broke this out for each one. This is the soft cap with the minimum. This is the hard cap at the maximum. So we have a maximum possible token supply after 5 iterations of 13 million, minimum of about 2.5 million. So ultimately what we need to do is decide a percentage amount is probably the easiest way to think about this. So if, for example, Simon wanted to put in, if our maximum was 5% and Simon wanted to put money into our first cap, presuming the smallest raise possible, he would only be able to put in 49,000 DAI. And at the max, he would be able to put in 62.5. So that's at a 5%. So I whipped up a quick sheet here, and we can play with this and say, what is it? If it's 7%, he can contribute up to 88,000, presuming we hit our iteration 1 raise. If we make it 10%, he can put in up to 125,000. So, I mean, I guess we can kind of earmark this. I know we had this conversation a long time ago, probably not in the same context, but we were talking about ownership of the whitelist, and we were talking about 10%, and then I even remember a number as big as 20% coming up. But I don't know what context that was. We were discussing that back then.
These numbers behave a little bit differently than you guys think. Just think of them like the inverse of something. So it's the number that this is 1 over. So that's 1 over 10. So yeah. I was arguing earlier that like 20 is 1 over 5. That's a little weak because it means that there's essentially, you can think of it in terms of that one person casting 1/5 of the power. But when you get to 10, it's already 1/10. So we don't have to go much lower than 10% because we, like, people. So I will say like 10% would be fine with me if you want to go a little smaller, but I don't think that we need to go much below that, because if you reason about it as 1 over a number, it's starting to distribute pretty well, and it's just going to distribute more.
I also just don't think that this decision needs to be made until we have more information. Like, I don't think it stops us from doing the raise.
That was one of the questions in the token contract specification. Is there a max?
Yeah, and I think that's the max is something we can determine later,
like on a case-by-case basis.
Or yeah, like once we have a better understanding of how many people actually want to subscribe. Okay. We might want to lower it. Like if we have huge results, then it'd be like, well, geez, we should just like not let anyone put in more than 5%. Or if we have very little results, then we might be like, you know what, I think we could do with like 12, 15%.
Also, remember that this is a rule that is not even, this rule is already sort of resolved by the fact that we're trying to set a global rule here, which might be something that is, it might be nice to have a global rule for clarity, but in reality, remember, everyone's getting their own cap. It's emerging from our rating of them. So this capping thing, this hard max cap is actually like a edge case protector. We're already doing everyone on a case-by-case basis the way that we're doing this. So we don't need it to be the primary rule. It's a fail-safe. So when we want to pick a big-ish number so that everyone knows there's like a hard fail-safe, we can. Or if we don't want to worry about it, you can just say, well, we don't even need to set this because our whole procedure sets an individual cap.
Yeah, but the what? How does the individual cap work? Because if I want to invest, at the beginning I say, yeah, I want to invest 20,000 die, and it's iteration one, and then I see like in iteration three, I think, oh, this is really working much better than I expected. Now I want to put in another
You
20,000.
have to basically make a request to put more money in because you would already unless you didn't give your whole cap. Actually, let's look this way. Let's suppose you make an application, we give you an assignment. We say you can donate up to so many, that's your allocation. And you say you don't do all of it. Then you could finish it by giving us more money in a later one. If you did all of it, you would probably have to ask us or try to justify a request for more.
We can also approve more than we want. The main thing is that we need people to do KYC up to a certain point, right? So it's really like how high is their KYC, and that's where we put the max limit on it. And I think for the first iteration, since we're not even doing KYC, we don't even have to have much of a max limit other than like, oh, this guy is clearly an investor and has nothing to contribute to the token engineering commons. We're going to cap him at, this much. Whereas, oh, this is Simon, or this is Trent, or this is like one of these like superstar experts. We should cap them at like pretty high,
Well, it's not correct to say we don't do KYC on the first iteration. We only do KYC once the goal is met,
Yes.
so that people receive their tokens. So
what I mean is after we do the first iteration, we can actually start making everybody's allowance based off of two things: how high have they done KYC, and how much, what was our subjective rating of them, and whichever one is lower is their cap.
Also another point about this, actually, Griff, it made me realize that because this process is happening in time, some people might we might want to raise their allocations just based on their contributions just in the discussions. Like the point was that we did our best subjective analysis based on what we were provided, but we're doing this as a community. Those people will enter, have memberships, start participating, and there may be reasons for people to show that they were more valuable than we realized. So I think it's just important that we aren't saying that those are final allocations. It's just that we have discretion about the individual caps.
It is the Common Stack Association's mandate to create a trusted seed. I say mandate kind of softly, but it's our job to create a trusted seed, and we should have the flexibility to do that in however we want, with the best information we have in the future at that time. So like less rules is better.
I think that's totally consistent. Yeah, it's totally consistent even with what I said. This is centralized to make decentralized things. The notion of the mandate of the centralized organization to create a trusted seed for decentralized organizations. So this is still centralized, but the mandate is what you're saying. And I think it fits right with the way the fundraising is working too, because we have to be centralized enough to be able to make these based on good, like collect good information, engage with people, etc., and do this. And that the results of this has to be a trusted seed is, again, we can't have the car on our way to Henry Ford's work thing. I think this is another place where that comes back, and we use the same FAQ answer, and we basically say, look, this is important. We can't leave it to chance. We're going to work really hard, diligent, assess, reassess, and get a good distribution on this group. But it's human decision making.
But I'm a bit worried that we cannot, in my opinion, we cannot automate that process. So, and the idea behind the 5 or 10% was to automate, or to at least automate more than we do right now. So are we limiting ourselves by doing this very manual process?
I don't think it'll be that hard. I imagine it'll be dependent on how easy Spunnet makes it. But I would imagine you'll be able to basically create a CSV file, and then with one transaction, be like, here's the groups. This is how I imagine that Spunnet will do it. But it's all up to Spunnet here. Is when you want to update the list, the whitelist, the whitelist. I think we'll call it the whitelist. When you want to update the whitelist limits or whatever, how do you put that in? I imagine it'll just be we set it up and we debate the numbers, and then we just push one button.
I think Bernd was
Yeah, there are a few like implementation details in the sense that one important remark I heard, or a remark that has pretty important implications to the contract, is that Bernd said we only do the KYC after the raise was successful in iteration 1. So does that also imply that we're not sending the tech tokens before the end of the race, the first iteration?
We're not committing to it, is what I would say. To give you space just in case. But ideally,
Yeah, no, but the thing is right now that if you send if you give an allowance for receiving DAI on the contract or sending your DAI to the contract, and you actually say, okay, I want to contribute, then in that function call he generates his tech tokens and sends them back to whoever's sending them, or to the proxy buyer, to the other address he wants to receive the tokens. But at this point in time, so in the transaction where you send the DAI, you also receive the tech tokens, but then the KYC hasn't been done yet, as I understand it. So
yes.
probably I should change that.
Well, at the end, if someone refuses to do KYC, we have to take their tokens and send them back their money.
But
Yeah, but that's the thing. Once you create the tokens, yeah, I mean, we can destroy them, of course, because we own the controller. We can destroy them again. Yeah, sure. But I mean, is that legally? Doesn't that impose a legal topic in the sense that you physically already gave those people those tokens before they did the KYC? Maybe it's just a detail, but just throwing it up here.
At least in the terms and conditions, I made sure we put in there that we have the total ability to like take people's tokens away. But sorry, Bernd.
So we're basically saying, so you're saying, and this is just a clarification, that we would essentially automatically generate the tokens, and there would be a certain potential period where we would, if they didn't end up finishing the KYC and we did a review or an internal audit, we would basically say, like, in the terms and conditions, that if you fail to complete this process by the stated time, like, your tokens will be deleted. And then, hopefully we won't have to exercise it, but that, like, we'll be legally covered for the fact that A, we can delete them, and B, that, we are in a position to assert that, that regulatory position.
Yeah, but that's not the only technical solution, in the sense that you can also just keep track of how many tokens people are supposed to get at a certain point in time. And then if you say, okay, now like iteration 1 is closed, then you could trigger one operation that sort of flips a switch where people can actually redeem their tokens, which haven't been created yet. So you don't necessarily have to send them to their address yet, but you can just internally keep track of what they still are supposed to get. So it's a detail, but I think it's more about the legal side of it. Are we allowed to send them tokens before they complete their KYC? That's one question. And second question would be, would it make sense to be able to sort of burn or like reclaim tokens? Because like from a blockchain perspective, that sounds very awkward. That you say, okay, you buy in with DAI, and then we send you tokens, but then at any time later, we can just still destroy your tokens. So, what guarantee does that give to people for their contribution if we have the power to destroy their tokens to our discretion?
Well, to be clear, though, this goes back to the centralized nature and the mandate of this organization. If you are on the list and you participate in a DAO, we can't destroy them. So think about it again temporally. As long as you're a good actor in the centralized organization, you remain in the curated list of trusted seeds. But technically, it goes beyond just not doing KYC. If this is truly a curated list of trusted seeds, which is an inherently centralized thing, then in fact, there's lots of other reasons why we might actually have to do something later. Not that I would hope none of them would ever arise, but someone who is, say, goes into a commons and then does, say, really shitty things and like whatever. I don't really want to go into the details, but the point is, if the actual function of this is to provide the trusted seed, then there's always got to be some recourse, even if the rules for exercising that recourse are really stringent, because that recourse is what protects the trusted seed. If it starts to get, if people somehow get into it, or people who were good turn into bad actors, they would completely undermine the value proposition of the whitelist. So technically, I would argue that we actually want it. We just want a really stringent process for the conditions under which you could exercise it.
Yeah, to be honest, my gut feeling towards this whole token contract is getting a little strange, in the sense that we're making it so centralized that you could even question why we even go to the trouble to automate that. If we have so much power, it would be much easier for us just to set up a multi-sig, just receive these funds, and then we sort of promise to these people that we'll send them those tokens later. Because if we can pull all the levers in the contract, then the only reason for doing it really on a smart contract that has some logic in it would be for transparency.
I would do that. I would further require that if you exercise those, that you even like exercise them with text. I mean, I know I'm very into provenance of like facts and transparency. I would argue that automating it is great in the sense that if we ever exercise those, we should actually even require that the people who are signing the multi-sig transaction requires, think like the Supreme Court. Like literally, we did this. This was the decision. This was the recommendation. This was the dissenting opinion. I would put those text fields in the fucking state. We're not saying it's not centralized, but we are trying to be super transparent. And I do think that, it should be very rare, but that like, if it happens, everyone should be able to know why, and that there's never any question about it. And I think that fits well with smart contracts. It's just not the way that people have been using them.
Also, I would second everything Z said, like 10x, plus the user experience of sending money to a contract and not getting tokens back in that moment is like really poor compared to sending money and automatically knowing that it all worked, as intended. And
it just feel right to me that we sort of would destroy tokens that are in possession of someone else. That really
not actually tokens. Actually, this is important because we talk about it. We're calling them tokens. They're actually the formal proof that you are on the whitelist and the extent to your right. I know this is getting into the legal side stuff a lot, but we've been using, us and everyone in this community, really like suboptimal analogies for what these things are. It's literally a proof of a right. And we're saying you have a proof of a right as long as you retain that right. And that right is hopefully not going to have to be taken away. I would love it if we didn't. But the fact is that if we want this to be a trusted seed, and we're talking about those decentralized organizations which we spawn off as being healthy, then maintaining the health of the seed is the mandate, as Griff said. And I don't want it to be easy, and I don't want it to be non-transparent. But if we don't treat this quote-unquote token as the proof of the right, it undermines everything that happens afterwards. And because of the fact that this isn't the way that people normally have used them, I understand it's like a little bit harder narratively, but like it's a difference between, I have this tradable thing with, I have a specific to me exact quantity, I can't transfer it, it just says I have the right to do this thing. And as long as I follow the rules and don't do something crazy, like say, fail to do my KYC, or say, go like fuck up over a commons by doing some crazy shit that we haven't thought of yet, that undermines the value proposition of the whitelist, then I do think it's important. And it's just going back to the difference between token and saying that it's a tokenized right.
I want to again back what Zargum said, except for one thing. It is pretty normal to do this. Every stable coin except for DAI does this. So many.
I think it's normal in our circle. People are getting there, but there's going to be layers of audience where some people are going to be like, oh, a token. We're using token in the highest form. with this, not the colloquial form. But I do agree with you. It is common, but circles matter, so we have to be clear.
So can we because the problem only comes from that we said we don't want to do KYC right at the beginning. So we want to do it once we have the cost, the fundraising goal reached. But how many people do we expect to participate? Is that 100? Is that 1,000 for the first iteration?
I still think that I don't think it's the best idea to readdress the scenario. I still think that we should keep the no KYC, keep the friction down to start, and do the KYC after. I think that's just it saves us risk, and it makes it less friction to get started.
So
I also don't think that it's the only reason. I think that this exposed this conversation, but I don't think this conversation, the KYC thing is the only like really obvious case that would be like, clearly we could have a thing that said so-and-so, like literally we warned them, we gave them a general outreach, we gave them a personal outreach. Then like eventually there may end up being a 3 of 5 signature that does a destroy that says, here's the list of all the times that we reached out to them about KYC, like they didn't respond. We have, in order to do regulatory compliance, we decided to destroy these tokens. That's the kind of thing I'm describing, which is our reference case. But what I'm arguing is that there are going to be unforeseen future things where if our mandate is what Griff said, we need to have that ability. We just have to be really anal about like the fact that we can't exercise it except under really extreme cases. And that even when we do, they have to have the full explanation stored in state.
Yeah. And in the terms and condition, we say tech tokens are not transferable, because this is another issue, right? What if somebody puts in Gnosis Safe and then transfers it to somebody we don't trust or something? You got to maintain the trusted seed. Tech tokens are not transferable, and it is a violation of these terms and service to transfer them by any means to other members or third parties. And then the big thing is the Common Stack Association has the right to revoke membership if there is any violation of these terms of service. And I mean,
but membership doesn't mean white. That needs to be added then, because it's not mentioned that this is the whitelist that the tokens, it's the membership you get thrown out of the association. So that's 2 different things.
Yeah, that was one of the questions that I put in that document, is about like making sure we say tech tokens or membership, because to me they're basically the same thing.
I think they're representations of the same thing, but they're different representations. So we have to be clear that we're assigning this to both, because there isn't, you kind of see what I mean? Like tech token is a representation of the right that's conferred to you as a result of your membership. But that means that we probably have to make sure that we refer to both. If your membership is revoked, so too are your rights associated with membership as deleted.
Yeah,
right? Like it's a very natural.
It's fine to me. We can do that. We just need to make sure that we call it the tech token is revoked. So it's because the membership doesn't give you much anyways. So people don't care about it much, I guess.
Yeah, I'm just trying to create some rigorous language, like it's legalese, but it's just like formal mappings in the language that say like if your membership is revoked, you lose the rights associated with that membership, which includes your tech tokens.
Yeah.
One small thing I'd like to have some clarification on what the ramifications are if we destroy someone's tech tokens, because let's suppose that we create some spin-off DAO and I use my tech tokens to buy into a bonding curve. It means that I sort of exercise my right with however many tech tokens I have to buy into that curve. But once I've made that purchase, even when in a later stage we take away this person's tech tokens, or the multisig decides that, what's the implication on the DAOs that person already invested in?
It has to be not just unknown. It literally has to be no, but in the sense that I say undecidable because it could be possible that that particular DAO, that the commons are DAOs, they're decentralized, might choose to take ramifications against you, but it would be in no way under our control. So at that point, it's entirely up to them. They would own, that person would own tokens in an address that had gotten its rights in the past. It would have them. If anything is to happen to those commons tokens, it would be entirely at the discretion of the DAO that those tokens were in.
Yeah, there's nothing we can do.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, no, I think that's just something we also have to mention or take into account when designing these bonding curves, that there's a possibility that all of a sudden these tech tokens that were used in that curve suddenly get
We don't
destroyed.
have to support that, actually. I mean, because we're putting the onus on the DAO, and we actually probably wouldn't want them to do anything. We don't need to add features, because ultimately that's observable, right? If you can look at this again, it kind of goes to directly supporting something versus it being possible. So we say it's at the discretion of the DAO, and at the discretion of the DAO means that they could look up the address, see that it had its membership revoked, and then the history of those tokens includes the fact that they were hatched by that address. And so if they want to do anything, it's totally observable and they can do it. But I don't think that we should be trying to add features to support that kind of action, at least not at this stage.
Okay.
I agree. So it's we just need to make sure that everything we decide then on that part needs to be reflected in the terms and conditions. Like we just said, that the tech tokens need to be able to be, or that we have the capability to revoke the tech tokens. So that's one thing.
This other ramifications question needs to get in the list for the FAQ, because although it's not necessarily a terms and conditions thing, or maybe it will be, it's more like, okay, well, if you've said you can revoke things, the exact question that Spawn had asked is actually really important, and I think that the answer that we just gave can easily be put in the FAQ, and that way people know that, okay, like, hey, if I'm a good actor, like, it's going to be hard as heck to do this to me anyway, and even if it does, the expectation is like, okay, but I'm not going to be kicked out of the DAOs unless the DAOs go through other, leaps and bounds. I think this is sort of a nice insulation. Again, the same thing. We've got this centralized, automated, regulated process, which is the trusted seed for the things that are truly decentralized, so that we can go have these healthy decentralized systems. And, we can kind of, I know maybe it's gray because those things are just truly decentralized, but at least we're starting them off in a state that you can trust them.
Okay.
Can
Yeah.
I ask a question? Hey guys, I've been listening for about 10 minutes, and though I want to ask questions more digging into this, I'm sure it would just be a distraction. You guys probably had lots of good convo already, so I'll just, Coach B, the terms and conditions, I was getting the understanding from you that it's necessary to complete those and have those finalized before we can sign any supplier agreements. Was I hearing that correctly from you?
There is a part in it about the tech token that we need to sort of copy paste into the supplier agreements. I would need to look into that if what we're discussing right now is affected by that. I'm not actually sure. Well,
I feel like what you're discussing right now is that the terms and conditions aren't complete, and there's more work that needs to go into them. And I am just I'm trying to understand how much of a block that is to me getting supplier agreements signed.
Let me just throw this out there. I'm pretty sure no one gets tech tokens for any work done in August, as far as so I don't think that it's a blocker, in my opinion. I think we just need some kind of agreement on paper of you're getting paid this in August for each person.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's true. August, we don't have any tokens that are being given out.
Okay.
Or it would be end of September, because 23rd of August is the start, right?
September, yeah.
No,
So
I
need to delete that part
September.
of the supplier agreements for August.
Hey,
Yeah.
so it's already been an hour and we have topics we haven't covered. So maybe do we feel content on this last one?
So we started off with the percentage, right? Do we? So we need to recap this again, I guess, just to be clear, sure that we covered it. So we said, since we have a very manual process of the membership application and therefore the allowance that we give onto the of tech tokens, the amount of tech tokens and the possible percentage overall, we would not put a specific percentage in there, but we would make a case-by-case decision on anyone applying. So, and the amount that we assign or that this person applies for would be sort of hard coded into his allowance at the end. So he cannot spend more than we or us assigned him tokens to. So he cannot pay more DAI into any part of the contract that would create more tokens than we have allocated to him, no matter what the multiplier is even.
Does that align with the KYC? Because is the KYC expressed in units of tokens or is it in units of DAI?
It's in units of DAI, because that's you cannot measure a token or give real value to the token.
Well,
I wouldn't.
I would challenge that. I actually think that we are saying one token, one DAI for the DAOs going forward, right?
Yeah.
So, and we don't actually need KYC for ourselves. We're doing KYC for the DAOs. So it's really like if someone does KYC up to 15,000 DAI, then they're only allowed to get 15,000 tokens. And because then otherwise they could violate the rules of the KYC when they get to the hatch sale for the DAO.
Yeah, I mean at the end, I have a call tomorrow with Arnaud and Sebastien from Mount Pelerin to really clarify that KYC part on the amounts, on the allocations, to be sure that we have like not accumulating the amounts, because it could be that you spend, if you KYC for the association now for 20,000, and the first time you put in 20,000, this would accumulate maybe to 40,000, because both then are being added, and you would have to KYC for 40,000. And if you do it again, it would be 60,000, and so on. It's to me, there's too many things there that are still not, that Mount Pelerin hasn't been very clear on that part, because there is an argument now that says if the smart contract that allocates the tokens back to you, if you pay DAI into the DAO later on, and it's really automated, there's no administrator, then you actually wouldn't need any KYC in the DAO.
Yes.
Can I ask a question? So I'm listening to this now, and it sounds to me like actually our membership state data is actually how much DAI you've put in, which is one number. Another number is the size of your allocation, in the sense that we've been talking about, right? This tech tokens number. But it sounds like there's actually a third number in that record, even if it has to be added later, which is how much you're KYC'd for. And while the list, the whitelist or the tech token record, if we think of it as being those three numbers, then we can actually have the time of the commons launch respect their KYC number. So you could have an allocation of 60, you could have only KYC'd to 40, and then when you go to the launch of commons, you would use the minimum of the two numbers. So instead of having to manage all of this logic in this contract, we could think of it as having just that is just a different number, and we have to set it when they do their KYC. It might be a spreadsheet, it might be whatever, how we inject it, but instead of trying to collapse the numbers by just keeping it there, you can basically use it at the time of the launch of the commons and just say your actual limit for the commons launch, the hatch, is the minimum of your allocation from the whitelist and your, like, from our process, and the amount that you are KYC'd for. And that would prevent us from having to, again, solve a bunch of logic now, because it would just be, here's the fact that you need to know, so that when we do a launch, you just take them in.
Yeah, the thing that also solves is that you don't have to have like a limit on tech tokens for each iteration, since the multiplier is different. Because if you would put in like your limit on tech tokens is 10,000 tokens, and if you buy into in the first phase, you would only be able to spend like 10,000 divided by 2.5 DAI and so that would limit our raise if you measure it in DAI. So it would automatically put a limit there. So if instead you just say like your KYC limit is, let's say, 50,000, but right now we want you only to have like 15,000 tokens. They still can buy in, but like in the next phase, they can still buy in more. Because we might change their limit, like in iteration 2, we might say like, now we allow you to have like 30,000 tokens in total or something. So I think doing it like that solves multiple problems at the same time.
Not sure I understand that. Is the person doing KYC for 50,000 or for the amount he puts in the first place?
They KYC for as much as they want. The point is, it's a separate record now. They basically go in and they do the KYC process. If they we can take their money because we're not actually launching a DAO yet. So what we're doing is, you give us money, you get a record that says, here's how much money you gave us. You get a record that says, here's what your maximum is as a result of our process that's asserted. You can have up to so many tech tokens, and there's one more number that asserts how much you KYC'd for. And though all three of those state variables can change, because you can give us more money, you can have a higher allocation, you could bid or ask for more allocation, and you could go back and you could KYC at a higher level. But the key here is that, again, we're actually maintaining a curated list. That's what we're actually doing. We're essentially bordering on manually curating this list. It's automated processing, but the on-chain provable curated list. And that thing is just used as that trusted seed. And the time it turns into something truly, decentralized and truly, where we have to worry about these numbers, is when you participate in a hatch. And we can, going back to what I was saying before, like, we can resolve that then. But I think the key here is that this data information is technically dynamic. It can change because you gave more money, or change because you got a higher allocation, or you got a higher allocation, then more money, and because you went and KYC'd higher. And those don't have to be coupled strictly. They're just limited by, your donation is blocked by your allocation. So if you want more and you're at cap, you have to go get an allocation. And if you're coming to a new hatch, you're also blocked by your KYC. But those are all just simple conditional logics. So none of them is really non-transparent. It's just more about understanding that the conditions that are used to resolve those inequalities can change in a variety of ways over time.
Okay, but that, from a technical perspective, I understand it from a logic or process perspective. But from a technical perspective, how would we recognize how much they paid in? Is it because we use the same address? They can only pay in from a certain address? Is it if we do so, is that the address we sent the tech tokens to, just to make it easier?
I think we have strong, remember that the tech tokens are a strong identity system. This is literally, you have an address associated with an application, associated with our choice to give that real person this real role, and that same real person is doing KYC. I don't actually see a problem with this at all in this stage, because everything about this is a strong identity system, not a pseudo-anonymous one. We want them to use one address because it should be associated clearly with the real person and the real KYC.
So just pragmatically spoken, so I would send.
I would say that we do, and I would encourage us to enable a proxy buy so people can send DAI from one address, and then the tokens go to another. But that both those addresses, we know that they're the same person, and they can't choose a new address ever, right? They're choosing, like, basically they can store their DAI somewhere. Maybe it's a MetaMask address, but then they want their tech tokens to be on their ledger. That's fine, right? But then this is wherever their tech tokens are, that is them, and that
They
is
need
who
to
they.
move private keys. I mean, they have to, if they want to take it from MetaMask and they want to back it up on a ledger, they're going to have to import the private keys from that address.
Yeah, but you can't do that. That's the challenge. So, like, if you
Okay.
if you maybe you want to go the other way, where you have money on your ledger and you want to store it in the MetaMask.
I use old school hardware. I don't use a ledger.
We can do, basically we can do proxy buy. People can say, hey, this is the address that I send from, and this is the address that I receive, and that's it, right? There's no other option there.
It's already foreseen in the contract, by the way, so it's, that will be included. One other question I had, but it's more maybe like, given the way we're looking at it right now, it might not be a problem, but just to clarify it, do we want to hide? So in the state, if we store like this address can buy up to 15,000 tech tokens, that number 15,000, do we want to have that obfuscated in the contract? Otherwise, other people can just read how many tokens people might be able to buy.
I would obfuscate that and also the level people are KYC'd at, actually. Since we put that in state, I think the only thing that you should be able to prove is that you have a membership. I think in fact, maybe that you have a membership and the amount of DAI that you put in, potentially. But even that, I mean, do you want people to be able to say, hey, this person gave X, or do you want to have people just say, hey, you have a record, and have all of the numbers themselves obscured? It's sort of a privacy versus transparency question.
Yeah, but I was referring to something else, because if you send the actual DAI, then everybody will see how much DAI you sent. There's no way to obfuscate that. But what we can do is, because at a certain point we will sort of import a whole list with like let's say 100 addresses and 100 like maximum limits how many tokens they can buy. If there is like some pretty big numbers in that list, people could assume that. I mean,
I agree.
If you're sort of a health bad.
Yeah, I think it makes sense for us to. I do think it makes sense to obscure the numbers that expose what is essentially private information. So like people can tell people can share that, but I would say both definitely your KYC level. I'm tempted to say your allocation, and I guess obviously we can't actually obscure the amount of DAI. I mean, but I guess the allocation is a question of transparency versus privacy.
I would say that we need to move some of this discussion to a specific token conversation, and we haven't talked about open sourcing CAD yet. And that's a very important thing.
Though, before we move on, because I think it's important, and I think it's not, unless there's going to be a long blowout, I think it's a direct trade-off. So it's basically transparency or privacy for the allocations. Period. There's no in between.
Well, yeah, it's transparency or pseudo privacy, unless you're a dev or unless you know how to read that.
Considering that you can, I'm going to give you an answer then. Because you can back it out, it's probably better if we just make it transparent, because anyone who goes back and reads the state information and does the calculations can figure it out. So rather than have it be limited to the people who can reverse engineer it, I would argue that we say transparency, because technically it's computable anyway. Why hide it from some people and not others?
Yeah, I would agree with that. However, can we please drop this topic? Is there anything else? Because we have so much. We have another important information. It's after midnight for you guys.
I understand it's after midnight here too, but I was gonna say to close that, we're also saying we will obscure their KYC levels because that should be private. How much you're KYC'd for should be private. So then that just closes the decision. We decide on transparency for one, obfuscate for the other, and it's done.
Yeah, and the big thing is we actually have no time frame that's stopping us from making this decision right now. Like we can make this decision after the raise.
It's done, so it doesn't matter. Unless someone's got an objection, I don't think it has to come up again.
Yeah, obviously we should hide everything we can.
Going once, twice.
Okay. So can we move to open sourcing CAD, or does anyone have anything that they need to close out on this?
Nope, I'm happy on that one. Can I just touch on this one because I think it's a 3-second topic, and then we can jump into open sourcing CAD. Baron, can we just make sure that some semblance of these? I just really like that they were all very in your face, very explicit in the risks being taken. Maybe we can emulate them or somewhat in our, maybe not in the terms and conditions, but where they wherever they end up signing. I guess that's the terms and conditions. So, is that okay if I ask that you include these towards the end, wherever users are signing?
I haven't read through them yet, but and what is the, so you want to have a very clear part on it, and what are the topics about?
So, I mean, they don't have to be exactly this structure, and they don't have to be, we were just going through it the other day, Griff and I, and we really liked how it was very clear and very explicit about the risks being taken. We don't have to go through each one now. I'm just asking that you take a moment to have a read through and see if any are relevant. I identified that this one is not because this is on their DApp. But everything else might be relevant. So if you feel any are useful, feel free to add them to the terms and conditions. I guess this is what I'm asking.
Yeah, okay. So it's not about the content here. It's about that they take certain parts and highlight them by having you click them as well.
Right, exactly. Yes.
Right?
Yeah, this is at the end of the terms and conditions. They had a big section. You have to click this. You have to click this. These were all check boxes just to really drive home these points.
Yeah, this is like a TLDR.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I think this is honestly something more for Spawnette than for Coach B, because it's about when they send money in, they get this thing flashed. It's like, hey, we know you're going to click through this, but like, this is happening.
Okay.
But what needs the text for that? So he will provide like the technical solution that people click on it, but I need to provide text for it, I guess.
Yeah, sounds great.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
All right.
Okay, so we're clear on that one. So we can move into our final topic, I believe. CAD in the pre-launch, or so we've got a couple of options here. Griff, you sounded like you wanted to lead this one, or?
Yeah. Let's see. So I think we already kind of talked about it pretty much. The big thing about open sourcing CAD is determining like the 4x multiplier and non-refundableness, and what we do. So okay, just to summarize what we are on. Honestly, guys, you know what? I just need 10 minutes because I was supposed to be doing other things during this time. I'm very frustrated, so I can't even keep focused. So I need about 10 minutes. Can we take a break for 10 minutes? I have so many people asking me about things, and I really need to answer them.
For sure.
I'm hopefully it's less than 10 minutes.
I'm good with that. Do you want me to lead this so you can get on to other things, or you want to be part of the? Yeah, of course you want to be part of the discussion. That's why we're here.
I'll just get an espresso and then come back.
Sounds good. I'm gonna grab a bite myself.
Perfect.
Okay, I'm so sorry about that, guys. I was supposed to meet some people in real life, and it's just getting pushed back. So
No problem.
shift pods.
So we were talking about moving CAD to the pre-launch and considerations around that.
Yes. So is Coach B still around though? Maybe he can give us a thumbs up if he can hear us.
Might have to give him
Said he
a
was
second.
going
Yeah.
make an espresso.
It's a latte he's making, I think.
Yeah, man, that's a latte at 12:30 at night. He's got a long night ahead of himself, huh?
Definitely a nightcap.
Well, actually, just Z, I'm curious, like, what level of risk do you want to take here? If you don't raise the money to 250 or whatever it is, and because what I would like to do is kind of push that to the next like iteration.
if it doesn't succeed to raise what we're talking about, I mean, I'm willing to have the discussion. The issue is that even that consideration keeps getting rolled, because I was saying in the docs that like some of the problem is that the opportunity costs are accumulating. It's not like a hard edge, but like, for example, the MIT Crypto Systems Field Building Summit, I'm supposed to be like very involved, and just it's an example I'm using because it's one where there's actually huge impacts on whether or not I'm presenting open source software or not. So if it's open source software, then this is like totally acceptable, academics, lots of credibility, does exactly what I want. If it's not, I really can't even, I can be like, oh, like I use this thing, but it's like almost completely out of scope from a field building, getting people to buy in, and like other people to start to see CAD/CAD as the thing to use. Because even if I'm going to open source it, it's just it's an element of the expectations in an academic environment. And so I also, obviously there's some Python centric data science opportunities growing, and it's not that they're past the point where I'm like, oh no, right this second, but they're like, because our timelines have slid a lot, and they kind of slid again a second time with the planning around Burning Man. Now I'm hitting up against things that were outside of my what I was expecting to be the hedge range for this. Like we were talking about certain dates. So and like
my core question is like, if we move CAD/CAD to the like iteration 0 is what I'm calling it, right? I think that was your name for it. And then we don't raise that before TAG. What do you want to do?
I don't think it has to be before TAG. I think iteration 0 can be open until 1 would start if we don't fill it. It's very manual, and a lot of us are going to be busy. It may depend on, like, what I'm trying to say is that like the dates that we have now are so late that I'm like, it's potentially problematic. I'm not 100% sold on it, but the last thing I want to do is create a scenario where like I feel like I have to just go open source it and then like blow up the whole like message, right? Like because if I at this point, like if I just release it without this, like, and again, I need the money to really help build the open source community, so it's a lot of pulling in different directions. But it's like, you know, for example, if I was at MIT and I had a really good slam dunk with a lot of those people and they all were interested in starting using it, that could also result in the kind of community and base that I would need in order to really continue to grow it. And so I'm trying to set some bounds, and I like the idea of doing the 0. I'm not sure that there's hopefully the 0 works. If for some reason it doesn't, the default is to just kind of roll it into 1 again. But the issue is that I still am going to be at that point where I'm like, fuck, do I need to just open source it? And I'm trying to avoid that.
Okay, so what I would say is that let me maybe make it a proposal. So iteration 0 is open for advisors and core team, and it closes on a certain date. I was gonna say like, you know, August 23rd, and then or we could even move it to September 15th if we want. And then
I don't think this is a FOMO raise. I think this is an organic sort of like, this is like literally the core team and the advisors. And you know, from my perspective, one thing that could happen, since it's not refundable, is that we could consider sort of issuing the funds that we get, open sourcing it, and just like lining up the numbers or something. Like exactly. Essentially, like I'm trying to find a way to get this actually open sourced.
That's what I was going to say, is that we raise what we can just from advisors and core team, and then whatever we don't raise, we in that field, we just push it into iteration 1. But then you have to gamble. You'll open source it. You'll get paid back if you can open source it whenever you got this money from the beginning, or whatever we could raise.
Yeah. So I think what would likely happen in that case is that I would open source it, take what I could get, and we would just have to like make sure that hopefully that getting it out there and getting people excited will get them excited enough that we're shipping, that we still end up, that doesn't undermine the raise 1, because we actually said, hey, like, you know, we did a small pre-raise, we shipped what we said we would ship, We just have to like make sure that the numbers in the main raise are fixed so that we can finish it out when raise one closes.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm totally aligned, totally on board. However, I propose that we do not change the budget of round one. We can, or of iteration one. We can still call this iteration 0 internally to know what we're talking about, but I don't want to split out the budget, especially if we're unsure what we are getting for for CAD open source. So I say we just leave the budgets as they are, and this is this is getting the ball rolling on iteration one.
Say is that because 0 is unrefundable, we don't actually have to close it. We can say one starts, like literally, even if we end up filling it later with people who come through even if we end up having to get the first 250, say we get the last 50 of the first 250 when we get the big opening, then we could. At least I'm thinking that it's just what Jeff's saying. The first 250 is the unrefundable seed. It has all of the budgeting and rules that we just said. And that if it doesn't fill up in the team and advisor only round, then it's the first N dollars in the live raise that goes into it, which could help create a sort of like initial kickoff, like try to get people to rush to be in the last few slots in 0. But only if it's not already full will that be a thing.
Yeah, and Jeff, can I hear why if we ended the official raise like at tag or the day before tag or something, what we would just have to cascade that number change across. Why not lower our ask? I mean, because I guess my challenge is that then we don't need that extra. We don't need to ask for the extra money. So let's lower our barrier to starting this.
Well, I would say the motivation from this on a narrative side is, I mean, it's the same amount we're raising. If we're starting from 250 and going to $1 million, or we're starting from 0 and going to 750, but starting at 250 is like momentum. You know, this is like, hey, among our team and advisors only, we have preceded this round with this amount, and that is enough to open source CAD. So we want to show you guys that not only are we asking for a reasonable raise, we are working ourselves to get this. We have been doing this for months, and we're shipping immediately industry critical tools. Now, we've proven that we can get things done on a shoestring budget, and we can get things done fast, and we can ship. And we want to ask you to now join us in this, like the ball is rolling. Let's get moving on this, you know? I think that's a much more compelling thing than we had a private raise and that's over and everyone got, 4X, but now we're offering this to you guys, but we're starting at 0. I think there's a much more compelling case for the first momentum.
Except we're starting at -50 because the 50 is not part of this raise.
No math.
Okay, but what I mean is that the 200 is part of iteration 1, but the 50 that is for our initial part is not part of the iteration 1. So like we can't just take the number raised and then add it to iteration 1.
I don't think we're adding anything. We're starting the raise for iteration 1 on August, or up until August 23rd with core team and advisors. We are allowing them to contribute to iteration 1.
And what I'm trying to say is that whatever amount goes to CAD in iteration 0, we subtract that from the amount that we start at for iteration 1, and really, and then we have to raise less for iteration 1.
I mean, we're talking semantics. Okay, let's say iteration 0 and iteration 1 have the same budget. Like it's the budget that we can call CAD iteration 0. I actually, if that's adding to the confusion, then I say we don't do that and we just keep iteration 1 how it is, and we launch this as like an early deliverable of iteration 1, along with our pre-seed funding surprise to the token engineering community.
I'm just not understanding. So if we want money to go to this to the Giveth campaign so that it can go to CAD, then that would be money that doesn't go to a token contract and therefore doesn't move the token contract so that iteration two can start at the 5 days.
Oh, I see. So this is the accounting within the token contract that you're concerned about.
Yes, and in general, like transparency and communication, and making sure that we can justify our budget.
I see. I was not aware that the token contract, of course, would be tracking this budget and anything that goes into the pre-seed. So I guess the question is, can we get the advisors to put money into the token contracts by August 23rd, or is that?
I mean,
let me pause for a second. I have a suggestion, and I want to and see what people think. What I was thinking was that for the pre-seed raise, that we would go potentially, because we have to do individual contracts anyway, right? So I was talking to Bernd about this for this. I was imagining that we would do the individual contracts and send money to the multi-sig, send the money from the multi-sig to the Giveth campaign, but then essentially this would require that when we launch the token contract, that we actually put those records in. Because again, we're talking about a very small number of people. It's the core team and the advisors. Back to the question of how do you deal with things, when you're automating things, how do you deal with what you do before they're automated? The answer is that when you launch the automation, you account for what happened before. And so if it's a spreadsheet full of, hey, we have these records of these transferences and they went to the multi-sig, to the Giveth campaign, we have the people and the stuff that's supposed to be there. It just means that we have to just be able to tell the token contract when it's launched, here's what happened before you were existing. That's
okay.
just the conditions. It seems reasonable to me that as long as we have a nice record of them, meaning here was the event, this address sent to this multi-sig and the multi-sig sent to Giveth, we have that information, it's reportable, and we say, like, hey, this is the initial conditions of the tech token. These people already did this. They're accounted.
Okay,
and then
the challenge becomes, we're saying, hey, if you guys give us this money, we'll open source CAD, but then actually we'll just open source CAD. It's not, there's a lack of like.
Well, I think we can get advisors on board by bringing, so this is part of what, Griff, when we meet to talk through our advisor one-on-ones, I almost want to walk them through like this presentation that we're going to give at TEG, because this is really amping up like what we can do for token engineers and token engineering, and having the like advisors in on like a pre-sale to specifically earmark funds for the open sourcing of CAD. That's a pretty big like feather in a token engineer's cap, I feel. So I think that would be a good, selling point for them to emphasize, what the tool that we are providing the community, and also telling them like we're doing this at TEG. This is the first token engineering global gathering. It is a world gathering of the most, advanced thinkers in this field. We want to launch this industry-changing open source tool along with applications to a membership that we are going to unite this industry. Like, it's just such a powerful narrative all coming together. I think advisors, maybe we don't have enough funds between them to raise, to raise the amount we're looking for, but I think it would.
I also don't think that the advisors are the people where we're concerned about like being clear that, yeah, like, we're going to, they kind of understand that I don't think there's anyone on the advisory board who doesn't know that I'm like trying to open source it, that one way or another it will get open source. They don't have to give us money. They should be giving us money because they're like, oh, well, if I don't give them money, they're not going to open source CAD. This is the core team and the advisors we're talking about, not the like. I feel like it's just different from the other deliverables in the longer roadmap where they're giving us money and we're building stuff. Like, these people know that we built it already. They know that we want to seed an open source community, that we want to like use it to empower them, and they want to be empowered by it. It's not a transaction. They're not buying CAD.
I guess I have like negative trust in this, like, oh yeah, if we do it for free, people will pay us for it later. Like I have a lot of negative.
Also, that's not what we're saying. We're asking for the money, and we're going to put it in the giveth milestone, and we're going to issue the code, and then we're going to take the milestone. Where it's the reverse. We're saying give us money, and we're going to open source it. Yeah. But we're just being honest that like if they didn't give us money, like we're going to find a way to open source it.
Okay, so that what that does is that's a misaligned incentive mechanism, right?
No, I'm saying it's not misaligned because the people that we're talking about, the ones we're talking to right now, are the small group. This is not a generic audience. These are the people who already know this. They all are. Their participation is in the. At least, I mean, maybe this is a misperception, but that the people who are engaging in the advisor part and the team part, like, are in the loop in terms of the fact that our goal is to provide this tool and that our needs are not transactional. It's not a purchase. That the needs is to actually succeed, and they're aligned on the incentives for it to succeed.
Okay, but the piece that I have trouble with is when we say, okay, we need $984,000 to launch iteration 1 and open source CAD/CAD. And then we like just say, well, we're open sourcing CAD/CAD. So hopefully you guys will give us more money so we can actually do the launch.
The CAD/CAD open sourcing is the CAD/CAD sourcing is like the open source is like the building block even for iteration 1 for every like it's like the reason it's pre is it's like on top of.
That's why it's great for iteration 0 because it is the foundation. But what happens with people's psychology has been my experience is that when you say, hey, I'll do this if you pay me, and then you just do it anyway, then they never want to pay you because you're going to do everything else for free as well.
I understand the problem. I very much need the money to really make CAD successful. The problem I'm talking about is just a high dimensional space where it's like, okay, like the money versus the academic versus the data science community. Like this is a very universal tool that I'm trying to get into the hands of all of the people that we need to make our world better. And the tensions are not very linear, and I'm just trying to figure out how to resolve them.
And I'm into it, but let's just take down our raise. Like say what we're doing. Just say,
yeah, no, that's fine. But that's what Jeff said. He just basically says that number isn't in 1 if it's in 0.
I'm fine with the numbers as long as we change the narrative to the point of saying not that we're going to open source CAD/CAD if we raise this money.
So I mean, this is a narrative concern, and actually, I'm going to exert some veto power. I really don't think we need to split out the budget. I think, if I go up there and be like, hey, we were going to do it, but now we're just going to do it for free, so we're suckers and take advantage of us. If we go out there, like we're giveth, like we've been doing this for so long, Griff. This is the last time you have to, and we're not even giving something away for free. I disagree. We're raising funds for it. We're raising funds from our trusted seed. We are establishing the trusted seed, our initial trusted seed, as like people who are bringing this important tool to the community, who can use it to launch the Token Engineering Commons for the community. Like this is the last time that we have to like give away, but it's an olive branch. It's a coordination signal. We know what we're doing. We're backed up by math and research and tools, and we're providing it to the community, and we're providing this framework for the community. And we got the ball rolling on this fundraise. I really think it's a powerful narrative, and I think we can knock it out of the park.
Yeah, I just want to plan for the 3 different scenarios of like, number 1, we reach the 200K from the advisors. Number 2, we reach enough for it to be okay. And number 3, we don't even get close to 200K. In fact, we can't even put any money into CAD/CAD.
This is something we'll know next week as well. I mean, if we talk to our advisors and we find out we're getting 10K cumulative from all of them, then we're going to have to reassess. Yes.
But, okay, so yeah. So let's just look at these 3 different scenarios. Okay. If we raise all of the money right away from the advisors, then I would say the right answer would be to just lower our first ask from 984 to 764, which is 10% buffer minus because then we can back up that number. totally, no problem, right? And it would be really easy in the smart contracts to just, that's one number, and everything else is the same. So it's all fine.
The whole thing is the same. It's just what we it's what we had before minus what we raise. Whether it's 0 or whether it's the whole thing, you're literally just subtracting the outcome.
And it's creating a lot more work, and it's also taking the wind out of the sails of our narrative, in my opinion.
So our narrative is that we are that we already raised 200K, and we're going to open source CAD using that money.
Yeah.
What? We're going to open source CAD using that money, and now we just need to get to 984 the rest of the way. So help us get to the rest of the way.
And use it, right? And so the part of the reason this works as this is the leading point is because it's and use the tool. Like, surprise, we managed to get to this point. Our internal teams covered the base. We spent it to support the open source of this tool, and we're using this tool like, I don't know. To me, from the time I've spent with Jeff, I feel like this works. I think it's going to be a little work on the narrative team side, but that as long as the accounting, to your point, Griff, is handled, I don't see it as not being handleable. Both accounting and narrative are going to have like stuff we have to do, but I don't think either of them is problematic.
As long as we take out this idea that we're open sourcing CAD with that money. Well, I mean, we can say that with that, or as long as we take away this, like, we will open source CAD with that money.
Yeah. No, that's part of the narrative drop. This is part of the surprise. We are open sourcing CAD today.
Okay, and then now there's these two other scenarios. The middle one is the really interesting one, where it's like, okay, we only raise 100K, like, or basically like, what's the minimum that you would open source CAD with?
I have a better idea for you, and I'm going to ask you whether you can do this. You can tell me if I'm wrong, but do you have a way to essentially assign the funds in the Giveth thing where, like, you can clear a milestone and have the rest of it flow through later? In other words, pass it to the milestone, even if it's incomplete, clear the milestone, and finish it later.
Yeah, of course.
So, like, what I'm imagining then is that if it's not full, we take, and this is the middle one, we still follow the procedure of saying, hey, this goes to the Giveth milestone. The Giveth milestone had a dollar value that it's, the campaign raise wasn't met, but the milestone cleared anyway. And so we can open source it, account it, and the milestone will essentially have a debt, which means that when the money clears, we can theoretically put it in Giveth and take it out.
Yeah, totally.
So if you're good at that, then I think that covers the middle one.
Okay, so now what happens if we don't hit our raise? Are you willing to gamble?
I mean, but what I'm already saying is at that point, I mean, I'm not thrilled, but if I hit a raise, I'm going to have to make the same assessment. At least I've gotten something, because I'm not going to, that this is not ideal in some ways, but I'm going to end up open sourcing it and trying to find funding elsewhere. Like, I'm not going to, and it doesn't make sense for this to be closed source. So I want the money. I want to build the community. I want to push it in the best way that I can. But in a completely failure mode outcome, I don't go, oh, well, I'm not open sourcing it. I just have to go figure it out again another way.
So if we raise zero, like no money for CAD, you would still just open source
immediately. I might, well, to be clear, if it's real bad, like if it looks like we're going nowhere, I might seriously consider doing the announcement without any money at MIT just to try to get the buy-in from that community.
Okay, and which is great.
That's a failure mode scenario. That says it looks like everyone's saying, fuck you.
Yeah.
But by that point, we would also have launched. We would have not only failed on the pre-raise. We would have also had a massively slow start and lack of interest in the main one. And I would basically have to say, well, if no one's going to give us any money, then maybe I just need to start taking my next best opportunity.
Yeah, so now, and this is what I want to make sure that we plan for is, what if we can't raise, enough money to cover CAD's being open sourced at TAG? Like, I mean, I don't think that's an issue, and we will know next week, like the 9th, right? So next week.
So in that worst case, I would say we transferred the immediate first funds that we receive on September 23rd. He said it's a little late for his liking, but it's doable within his bounds, and that's iteration one's first day of funding. And I mean, if we don't see 200K, within, that's also a month after TEG. So we will have lots of conversations with lots of people and getting soft commitments, people like Jared Hope, people like whoever, if we can figure out the KYC for them, or, I mean, there will be interest over the first month, and we earmark the first 200, 250, whatever, to go straight to CAD as a backup in the worst case that we get nothing from our advisors and core team, which is very unrealistic.
Yeah, I would agree, but we can't earmark it because it's refundable, right? Like, so we would, if we don't reach our raise, then we have to give the money back.
Well,
Secondly, reach our raise.
Jeff saying that the first two, I mean, we don't have to do it this way, but I think the reason he framed it really all the way out of zero was because technically, if we said that the first 250 was the non-refundable block, then we wouldn't have that problem. But it's not clear to me that, I mean, if we're holding that line, then we would, when we hit that first 250, but to be clear, the non-refundable block gets a 4x. So we're giving people the benefit of being in the non-refundable block because it drops all the way down to 2.5. So I think that within reason, as long as we're clear about the fact that the trade-off is you're like the real leader, you're all in, no, like just you're in. You want the thing that this is going to do, you're going to get the 4x, but this isn't going to come back. If this is all we get, CAD's out, and we covered some operational costs for all this effort, and that's what happened. But you see what I mean? I thought that was the impression I'd gotten from Jeff about zero.
So then, should we get rid of the 3x for advisors?
If the advisors get 3x, if they come in more later, I mean, we can say that advisors can. At least my understanding was advisors always got. Did they always get 3x?
No, they up to a certain point of a date. Up to a certain
if it's too complicated, maybe if we're saying that we're offering them, I mean, maybe we should. We're offering them 4 instead of 3, but we're doing it in a slightly more like forward manner.
Or Griff's concern with 4 was that it would encourage advisors to contribute less, and especially if we're looking at total percentage of whitelist. If we're looking to raise, $250,000 from 10 people, most of which are going to be very small contributions, we are going to need some large contributions. And if we're giving 4x, then we have to be wary of the ownership percentage of the tech token supply.
I have a problem with it being 3. If you think that that's better, I think the key is it has to be high, because by taking this, saying it's not real, it has to be kind of like a little bit of a jump.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to push
I'm not totally
as possible. That's what I'm pushing for right now.
What?
As few changes as possible is what I'm pushing for.
Okay, so
three.
If it's 4x for the non-refundable, I think that's fine. Removing because even if someone puts in 150, that puts them at 600,000 tech tokens, which was at your 5%. That was basically at your 5%. So like
5%. That was at the max though. Wait, where was that? Sorry.
Scroll up.
On this thing? No.
Yeah, it's in the min-max conversation. You said that it was 500 and something for 5%.
Actually, even this, when you think about it, because in the non-refundable pre-seed beginning, it's actually not crazy that people are going to be like, that's essentially undiluted initial investors. So like numerically, the fact that they're going to be a big percentage of this during the period when it's only them is like unavoidable, because it's only them. The point is that as it progresses, they're going to dilute out to reasonable numbers. But so it's not reasonable to expect them not to be a big percentage at the beginning.
For sure.
Because
I'm not suggesting that, but these numbers are if we reach iteration 5. So
Okay.
this is our full fundraise. So that's might be a little bit misleading. We may not raise near that amount. That's like a $13 million or 13 million tech token supply. So that's presuming we get all the way to raising, the full max.
We might just have to. I mean, I really do like the 4x to 2.5 change, because it being refundable versus non-refundable, that's pretty big, you know.
Okay.
Uh,
So we can do that.
maybe we say, if Eden, if you want to, like, if Outlier Venture wants to do that much, you know, they can get your bonus, but we have to split it between a few people, because we want, like, governance to be somewhat decentralized.
You want to split his tech tokens to other people?
to other members of the Outlier partners. So he's not saying that the Outlier can't invest that much. We could give them an allocation, but we could ask them to assign it to multiple partners so that the governance is spread more.
So is that something that needs to go into like T's and C's or?
I think it's
I don't think so.
mutual agreements thing, because we're doing, again, remember, individual allocation.
Yeah. Okay.
If they say Outlier is interested in 150, we could say, would you be it would have to be a conversation, but we say, how would you feel about splitting that across 3 partners?
Okay. So 4x non-refundable. And I think, Griff, you're right. It's important to map out the space of options we need to consider. But I think we will also have answers to these as early as next week. And like we can come up with a plan B right now, which is, I think, kind of what things we're considering or discussing. But we will know next week which way we have to move forward. And I will still be in touch with Z, and actually in person with Z. So as we're having these advisor meetings, if it is really sounding like we're coming up short, then we figure out an alternative plan. But if we're raising, 150, 200K as like, okay, that is the first payment for open sourcing CAD, and the rest comes, when the iteration or when the million plus is raised.
Because we're really only talking about, because remember that we solved the middle ground problem quite well. So because we solved the middle ground problem quite well, we're really only talking about the most extreme failure case now.
Yeah, well, and or also gotta just talk about the lopsided case, right? Where we just have Eden or Outlier Venture is putting in, 90% of this or something. That I don't think.
But I mean, it probably won't happen, but if that happened, so like if say it was just our team and then like a tiny bit from Trent and a tiny bit from Simon and then Outlier. The thing about Outlier is they're actually a huge group of partners who have a lot of autonomy. And so if it were Outlier, I would go so far as to say, hey, we're not going to let you take it on one person, but you actually have a bunch of people, all of whom would be qualified and have independent opinions. And if we spread it to a number that made us comfortable, I would be willing to do that. That's my opinion, but I also know enough of them to know that they're not a voting block. They're actually a bunch of people with different knowledge and opinions.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Unlike Spank Chain, for instance. Like, Amin just had 500 votes in Spank Chain, and he got them all to vote within the same hour on something to swing a vote, like straight up. I don't think
Outlier is not. They're just like, if we give the agency to the individual partners, the partners will vote the way their opinions are.
Okay, cool. I'm happy with this. I'm happy. I feel like at least we can debate the finer details of it. The only thing I want to check in on is if we should remove, like right now, advisors get. This is the current. If the 4x thing and advisors is solid, then advisors get opportunity to buy 4x non-refundable, 3x refundable, and they get 10,000 tech tokens for free. right?
I'd say we cut the 3x refundable if we really want to emphasize, and then it just cuts down on the narrative too. It's one less thing we have to explain, one less decision analysis paralysis. We say, here's your chance. If you really want to get into this, 4x non-refundable. Otherwise, 2x starts, whenever. But we really want to drum this up to the advisor team and core team as like we are like gaining the momentum. We want to start this off with a bang. You guys are the people we came to for a reason, and we want to really make this a successful raise and get the ball rolling on this. So I think offering the 4x non-refundable is a good.
Okay. And then I guess another thing on that. Well, does anyone object to removing the 3x? Because that also affects core team.
So we're just saying 4x. Oh yeah. So core team and advisor, same group then.
Yeah.
I like putting them in the same group. I've obviously at this point, I'm just I prefer it, but I'm not going to be. Well, if people have issues or think that other people will be concerned, then we can amend. But I think that this is part of the discussion we had about this, was making a really strong showing that as a group that we're putting skin in the game. And I think that the 4x non-refundable for advisors and core team members is a very, very strong skin in the game signal. Even if our block is not full, it's just like, hey, look, we took what we had. Because me personally, I'm not particularly in a position to do a lot, but I'm squeezing it out to try to make sure that I'm putting skin in the game.
And yeah,
let's do it.
Spun it.
Yeah, no, I think it all makes sense in the sense that the more skin you have in the game, the more it adds to the credibility of the whole narrative, I think. But I also think, overall, is it by telling the story on the 23rd, and whatever the result is, if it's very good, that's a confirmation of not only the efforts that we've been doing, but also of the value that people assess to the CatCat as a tool, So if that's very good, if it's very bad, by that time we've done our best in explaining the whole concept and sort of the value that CatCat brings to the table and all the work that we're going to put into that, in the whole concept of the common stack. If it doesn't resonate, that also tells something about how we don't get external validation of what we're doing. So my expectation is, if it's so the discussion sort of the valuation of even open sourcing CatCat will align automatically with the external validation that we get from people. So in any case, I think it will be a correct assessment. So if people, in the worst case, people say, yeah, we really don't believe that, and we really don't value any of the things you're saying, and thereby we're not going to send any contributions in, then that's also an assessment of the value that we're bringing to the table. On the other hand, which is my hope and also my expectation, that people will be enthusiastic for it. We will raise enough money not to have this discussion in the first place. So I think it aligns with, and so sort of the outcome will align with the valuation of everything. So, and that being said, I think the four.
Oh wow, your mic stopped working.
Yeah, my battery is dead. We've been going on for too long. No, so I'm in for that. I just have one technical question, because I also heard another new thing arise, that we should be able to give tokens for free, like tech tokens, to the advisors. I didn't know that up till now. So that means that the controller should also it should also be possible in the controller just to mint tokens to an address without a DAI payment.
I think that we should have ridiculous centralized control over this thing, but that
Yeah, sure, yeah.
but for this specific thing, we should be able to initialize that. So
Yeah, I was gonna say if we're doing anything like what I was saying as this as the initializer, then it's resolved at the point of setting their initial state, not at the point of minting token.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, we could always, I mean, there's a million ways to do this, but we could always do like create a token where we just give tokens out, like a mini-me token where we give tokens out to the people that are supposed to have it, and then the tech token is a clone of the common stack pre-mine
The
effectively.
initial thing, sure. Yeah, but you can always swap out the controller, so you can just add and change the behavior of the token. So if in a later stage you want to decide to give an extra advisor some more tokens or like an additional chunk of tokens. I mean, anything is possible up to the point where you say we drop the control, so we drop the ownership of the controller, then it's frozen. But up to that moment, you can really do whatever you want.
Yeah. And
Okay.
hopefully we will drop the controller one day. One last thing before we all go, unless Bernd wanted to have a comment on 3x being dropped.
No, I'm fine with the 4x for the non-refundable and dropping the 3x then, because they can still participate regular in any other iteration.
Yeah. Can I just get a quick, while we're all here and we need this information anyway, like, does anyone have like a soft commitment of how much money they want to put into this thing? I mean, I can say that for me, I'm going to put in as little as I can, but make sure that everyone gets paid for whatever salaries we commit to in August and September.
I think it's going to be like 2,500 to 3K for me. I pretty broke, and I'm worried about running out of money in a couple capacities. But for the moment, I'm hoping that this kind of, well, I'm hoping that everything goes well, but it's non-refundable, so I don't have like, it's about as much as I can put in and not be like, oh fuck.
Yeah, and just to give numbers, I'm putting in a max 50K, but hoping to get that number down because we get other people's money, so I don't have to do that.
Yeah, I was thinking in the range of 10K, something like that. But yeah, also like with the new information that's here, I need to see what's. But I mean, that's sort of the ballpark figure I was thinking of.
Okay. Coach B?
No, I won't be able to put anything in there.
What about you, Jeff?
I'm 5 to 10 in that range.
Okay.
So I mean that's already 75 we're looking at ish.
Yeah.
And I mean worst case.
Yeah, worst case.
And I mean that's also not including the wider core team, which would probably round that out to six figures. And then we're already halfway there. So that's not even like the big hitters that we're kind of.
Yeah. So we'll need around 250, 270.
Yeah.
To include CAD and cover August and back pay for everyone.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, cool. I'm sorry for the long meeting, guys.
Yeah, me too. I was supposed to drive that. I failed. Well, we got a lot of stuff done. We got a lot of decisions made, but sorry for taking everybody's night. I'm going to go eat dinner now.
Yeah.
It's Barcelona time to go out for dinner now.
Yeah. Thank God.
Yeah.
But I asked for a late meeting, so
Yeah. All right, cool. It's really productive. I think we got a lot done in that call, and it sounds like there's more discussions around the token contract. Spotnet, Griff, Bernd, I suppose you guys will all be discussing. Feel free to bring me in on anything needed. I will put these notes in our tactical meeting folder so we can find them, and I'll propagate all these changes through our documents as well.
Cool.
Thanks, Jeff.
Okay. Thanks to everybody.
Awesome. Thanks,
See you guys.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Have a good